Good evening, residents of Wilbrooke. This is your official weekly broadcast presented by the Homeowners Association. For those who missed the daily announcements this week, here is a complete recap of this week's community news and incident reports.
It was supposed to be cheerful. The summer picnic is the highlight of Wilbrooke's calendar. Tables lined with pies, baskets neatly arranged, the smell of cut grass drifting across the park. Parents chatted politely, neighbors exchanged recipes, and the children played at the far end of the lawn. They had been singing, as they always do, the same little round, voices weaving together in uncanny harmony. Too perfect for children, too steady, but still sweet. Then they stopped, not gradually, not one by one, all at once. The silence was so sharp it seemed to cut through the air. Every child froze mid-motion, hands still clasped, eyes turned in the same direction. At first, no one noticed. Parents carried on their conversations, neighbors lifted forks, but slowly heads turned toward the quiet. That's when we saw them, dozens of children, perfectly still, eyes wide, staring at something just beyond the tree line. I followed their gaze. The woods looked normal enough. Branches swayed gently, sunlight cut through the leaves. Nothing moved, nothing stirred, but the children saw something. One boy's lips trembled as though he wanted to keep singing but couldn't. A girl raised her hand halfway, then let it fall back to her side. None of them blinked. The silence stretched on. A minute, two. Parents began calling softly, their voices tight with confusion. Not one child responded. Finally, one little girl, I think her name is Clara, stepped forward. She lifted her hand slowly, like she was about to wave. Then she pointed. Every other child's hand rose to follow. Dozens of small arms, pointing in the same direction, eyes fixed on the same invisible thing. The adults shifted uneasily. One mother laughed nervously, saying it must be a game, but her voice faltered when she saw how rigid the children's bodies were, how pale their faces had become. Then, just as suddenly, they lowered their hands. Their gazes broke, and without a word, they returned to singing. The same round, the same harmony, picking up as if nothing had happened. Neighbors clapped politely, plates were passed, the picnic continued, but the parents looked uneasy, because while the children sang, every eye stayed fixed on them, afraid to look toward the trees. I went back later, after sunset, just to be sure. The woods were quiet, too quiet, and that's when I saw it. Small footprints pressed into the dirt, dozens of them, circling in a wide ring just beyond the tree line, as if the children had been standing there all along.
Good evening, residents. Janine here once again. From time to time, the committee receives complaints. They are not unusual. Some arrive folded into envelopes slipped beneath our office door. Others are whispered between neighbors at dusk. And sometimes, regrettably, they are spoken aloud, where everyone can hear. This week, a resident chose to raise his voice in an unfortunate manner. He used the word slop. Such a small word. Such a careless one. In Wilbrooke, words matter. They echo longer than laughter. They stain more permanently than ink. And when a word is chosen poorly, the committee takes note. We quickly discovered that this particular neighbor is not, in fact, an example of Wilbrooke's finest. At the age of 40, he still lives in his parents' basement. He does not greet his neighbors. He does not contribute to the order of our community. Instead, he lingers in the dim light of a single bulb, surrounded by clutter, clutter, clutter. And residents, you know how we feel about clutter. Neatness is not just a preference, it is survival. Reports indicate that his hair remains uncombed, his shirt wrinkled, and his face unshaven. He clutches magazines, but not the kind approved by the committee. His walls are decorated not with cheerful paintings or family portraits, but crude posters declaring hatred for Wilbrooke itself. Hatred, as you know, is not permitted here. Hatred draws attention. Hatred demands correction. And so the committee has thanked him for his words, thanked him for his contribution, thanked him for volunteering. Already his home is quieter. The noise of radios and complaints has been replaced with silence. Neighbors report that when they pass the house, the curtains remain drawn, but a figure still sits in the window, smiling too wide, his posture finally corrected. Let this serve as a reminder, residents. At 40, one should not still be living in one's parents' basement. At 40, one should understand that neatness is not optional. At 40, one should know that words have weight. When you fail to live properly, when you fail to keep your home in order, when you fail to respect your neighbors, you become the example. Do not misunderstand. This is not cruelty. This is correction. This is how Wilbrooke remains safe and beautiful and whole. So tonight, straighten your curtains. Polish your silver, fold your shirts and trim your lawns. Keep your homes in order, for order is life. And remember, if you ever feel tempted to call something slop, take care. You may discover the committee has already filed your words away and already prepared a chair at the table in your name. Thank you for your compliance, residents. And thank you once again to our neighbor in the basement.
Founders' Day picnic is this Saturday. Attendance is expected, and plates will be issued in alphabetical order. Your seat is already reserved.
Please ensure hedges are trimmed to regulation height before Friday's inspection. Adjustments will be made if necessary. Good evening, neighbors. Janine here once again. Last night, neighbors reported a minor disturbance at the Henderson residence. The issue began with a raised voice, though it was later agreed the voice did not belong to the Henderson child. This is, of course, not unusual. Children often go through periods of adjustment. Still, some describe the tone as lower, unfamiliar, and carrying words the child would not have known. We remind residents that vocabulary expansion is perfectly healthy, provided the HOA approves the source material. Several neighbors noted the girl's eyes appeared brighter than the standard Wilbrooke shade. One even claimed they reflected the curtains, though the curtains were drawn. This kind of observation is not recommended. In fact, the Wellness Committee would like to remind everyone, when you notice something unusual, it is best to smile, nod politely, and continue with your evening routine. At the height of the incident, furniture was said to shift on its own, chairs turned outward as though preparing for guests. One dining table rotated slowly toward the window. The HOA finds this encouraging. Hospitality is, after all, one of Wilbrooke's defining traits. We commend the Henderson home for its enthusiasm in this regard. Shortly thereafter, the HOA wellness team arrived. Residents will be pleased to know they brought both pamphlets and flowers. The family was comforted. The girl's tone returned to what neighbors recognize as her own, though some insist they still heard a faint echo in the background. The committee assures us this is residual energy, nothing more, and that it will fade within the week. We encourage residents not to dwell on the event. The Hendersons have been reassured. The home has been resealed, and Diane herself has extended her warmest regards. Please remember, children grow, houses change, and Wilbrooke always corrects itself. If you hear voices that do not belong to you, do not be alarmed. They belong to Wilbrooke, and Wilbrooke belongs to us all. This concludes today's wellness update. Have a pleasant evening and keep your curtains drawn. In Wilbrooke, the children set up lemonade stands on warm afternoons. Their aprons are spotless, their pitchers always full, their smiles practiced. Neighbors stop by, coins clinking softly on the counter. But in Wilbrooke, no one asks where the lemons come from. No one asks why the drink tastes faintly metallic, and everyone drinks to the very bottom. That's the refreshment of Wilbrooke. Everyone sips, everyone swallows.
If the grocery store intercom says your name, leave your cart and exit calmly. Do not look down the aisles. Do not speak to what follows you out. The store does not explain, it only replaces.
Good evening, everyone. Janine here with the HOA to provide a cheerful recap of last night's Wilbrooke High School prom. The event was overall a glowing success. Attendance was high, outfits sparkled, and our gymnasium was transformed into a ballroom worthy of praise. However, as many of you already know, one young resident displayed what we might call excessive enthusiasm. The evening began in perfect order. Streamers were hung, refreshments were served, and the DJ reported record participation during the opening dances. For a time, all was well. But midway through the event, a small disruption shifted the evening's tone. Several witnesses describe a sudden silence as a bucket, suspended above the stage for decorative effect, tipped prematurely. While glitter was the intended material, it appears the contents were heavier, darker, and more difficult to remove. The crowned prom queen stood stunned beneath the spill. Those closest to her insist she remained perfectly composed, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly at her waist. Yet many claim the gymnasium lights began to flicker. Others swear the music faltered into static. Some even report the faint sound of a second heartbeat pulsing through the walls. It was then that the enthusiasm began. Decoration shifted. Balloons floated against gravity, pressing to the ceiling as though fleeing. Folding chairs slid across the floor without being touched, pinning several guests politely to the walls. One teacher, attempting to restore order, found the microphone drawn from his hand, rising several feet before shattering against the rafters. Still, no one reported physical harm, only disarray. Students described the prom queen's eyes as bright beyond reason. One young man insists her pupils reflected the entire gym, as though the room itself were watching. Another claims she never blinked, not once throughout the disturbance. While concerning, we must remember, teenagers often dramatize. Eyes, like mirrors, can catch more than intended. The most spirited activity occurred when the gymnasium doors closed abruptly. Attendees report they could not open them, no matter how they pulled. For a few moments, the entire student body was locked inside, surrounded by decorations now moving at will. Streamers wrapped themselves tightly around the rafters, tables overturned, and the disco ball swung without music. It should be noted that several parents waiting in their cars later claimed they saw the gym glowing faint red through its windows. One even suggested the building exhaled smoke. We assure you this was simply the result of stage lighting and poorly timed fog machines. The event ended as suddenly as it began. The light steadied, the doors reopened, and the prom queen departed alone. Witnesses recall her dress trailing water along the gym floor, though no source of water was found. The remaining students quietly collected their belongings and filed out without incident. By dawn, the market's cleanup crew had restored the gym to full compliance. Glitter, blood, or any other substance, whatever it may have been, was gone within 24 hours. The HOA would like to emphasize that passion among young residents is normal. Sometimes enthusiasm expresses itself in dramatic ways. We commend the community for responding calmly and avoiding unnecessary speculation. Moving forward, the association recommends the following. Future events should avoid suspended decorations above central stages. Folding chairs should remain secured in neat rows, not allowed to drift freely. Students are reminded that strong emotions, though natural, should be moderated in public. Diane has reviewed the footage personally. She assures us the prom queen's display, while memorable, was a one-time occurrence. Diane extends her personal thanks to the market crew for completing cleanup swiftly and reminds us that Wilbrooke corrects itself, even when its younger residents test boundaries. This concludes today's Community Incident Report. Thank you for your cooperation, your patience, and your understanding that enthusiasm is part of growth. Please continue celebrating our youth, knowing that Wilbrooke supports every milestone, whether bright with glitter or a little darker than expected. This concludes the official Wilbrooke Weekly broadcast. Please return to your routines and remember, Diane is always with you.